welcome back to Stories in AI. Today's guest was Ben Taylor. Now, Ben is awesome. He's an entrepreneur, a technologist, a data scientist, and above all, a storyteller. He got really early into AI, and right out of college, he did chemical engineering, worked at Intel and Micron on photolithography to process control to yield control kind of problems, worked at an hedge fund as an AI analyst to predict stock prices using machine learning based on news. He worked at HireVue and then at Zeph.ai, which he co-founded, who was then recently acquired by DataRobot. Now, we talked about all kinds of things, starting from snowboarding while being on Zoom calls, which, by the way, he regularly does. AI and storytelling, problems with deep learning today, find and kill droids and killer robots, stateful Alexas, enterprise adoption of AI, what's really blocking, what's really working, what's not, war bubbles, and a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, hey, I have Ben Taylor here with me today. Ben, welcome to Stories in AI. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ganesh.
I'm so glad that you're not, skiing down a double black diamond while taking this podcast, because I saw you keep doing that on Zoom and take Zoom calls that way.
Yeah, I try not to do that, but I think in the springtime there's a sense of urgency where Mother Nature has its own calendar, and people try to react to these last second storms. So it is a special treat to get fresh powder in Utah, coming into June, but it does happen.
Either that or, I would expect you to be on your side-by-side, the Can-Am, and trying to actually go through rivers while talking to me too. So it's amazing to see you being so adventurous, in the middle of driving AI forward, I guess.
Well, this is a perfect opportunity for a Verizon ad. Thanks to Verizon and my LTE coverage, I can be out there doing these things and still get decent reception. So
that is crazy. That is awesome. Anyway, so thanks again for agreeing to be on the show. And let me ask you let me start by asking you about your background. Like, tell us about how did you get into AI? What prompted you, and what really attracted you to get so deep in this?
Yeah, I think so college students, I generalize sometimes, and that insults people, and that's okay. So I like to say college students are pretty naive. Like they just don't know what they're going to do with their careers, and sometimes they say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. They don't know all the options. And so when I went to college, I think I wanted to be a doctor like my dad. And you could say that's because like daddy's son, need dad to be proud of me issues or things like that. So I go down that route. I like math, and I by chance get exposed to programming. So when I was studying chemical engineering, I had an e-commerce store. So we started a business. We're selling rock climbing gear, and so I'm shipping it all over the world, which was interesting because imagine going in to take a midterm and then your website's down, and you're like, oh crap! And I wasn't a developer, so I remember it almost felt like dealing drugs, where I'm trying to find people on campus that could fix my PHP code because I've run into a problem, and so I'm literally handing like cash to some kid to go fix my curly brackets on something I messed up. And then I remember doing like checkout credit card integrations in 2003 was really hard. I was reading like banking API documentation. Like today it'd be laughable. You could be like, oh, hey, go set up an e-commerce checkout tonight with credit card. Like anyone could go do it. But in 2003 it was hard. But I fell in love with high performance computing. I think there's this, I don't know if it's like the sunk cost fallacy, but the idea of if I can have a computer that works really hard for me for a week, there's this idea that it's producing something that's valuable. That's not actually true. That's not a guarantee. Because I later worked at a hedge fund where we had 600 GPUs in the office, and so I would have, we would do 10 million back tests per day, all in GPU memory, never touching the CPU, and that's not a guarantee of success. Like, more compute does not map to value.
That is true.
But sometimes we like to think it does. We like to think a bigger computer. So I think falling in love with it, AI just feels like magic. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to discuss things that feel like science fiction, but in 3 to 5 years, we can circle back around and realize they weren't. And so I think that's a really fun place to be, because you never know what you're going to be working on. It's never going to get boring. Like amoxicillin prescriptions being a doctor, that would get boring fast.
That's true. That's true. It's funny you touched upon a few things. One, definitely, I won't miss this reference again. You compared starting a business to dealing drugs. That is awesome, right? It's so true. You got to find, you got to peddle it. You got to make this happen. It's funny you say that. AI is like magic, and you've done a lot of work in your background. Tell us a few of examples where you really saw it come to life as magic, right? Where you're trying to solve a problem
Yeah.
or
So
something similar.
So this isn't really AI heuristics, but I remember a long time ago, maybe 2005 or 6, when I was finally made the jump into Linux. Because I had a professor telling me that you need to switch off of Windows, you need to go to
Sure.
Gen 2, which is hilarious because I'm like hindsight, you're like Gen 2, like you're trying to set me up to fail. But like, fortunately, I went to Ubuntu and I learned Linux, and I remember playing with like chatbots where you can type something in and it'll respond. So you're like, I think you're stupid, and the computer will respond with like, I want to kill you now, or something. Like it's just a lookup table, like heuristics. It's not AI. But I remember kind of realizing that, oh, this is really strange. I dealt with like some AI art generation early on before deep learning, playing with that. That was interesting. But I think for it coming alive, some of us geek out about artificial general intelligence. Do you think it's possible to create a consciousness? And some people think it is, some people think it isn't. I'm in the camp where I think it is. I did have the experience teaching AI to play Call of Duty on the Xbox, where my theater room was just playing 24/7. So it's just restarting games on Call of Duty. And I remember being so excited in the morning to come down and see how the play was progressing using reinforced learning. And I remember coming downstairs, I'm drinking my coffee, and I watched it kill someone. And normally you would celebrate. You'd feel like, yes, like this is fantastic. But I just kind of felt this really gross, like monster in my basement. Like it was kind of this preview that, and people that are in AI know this, is there is a future where humans, when it comes to like a military AI global war, a human competing against an AI system has no chance of success.
No, it's funny you say, and you bring up AGI early in the conversation, and I think there's also and you're right. I'm also in the camp that I believe AGI is possible. The timelines are, definitely not anything. I don't think it's going to be possible in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be much longer than that. But it also really comes down to the definition of what you really think and people think of AI. You don't have to be just that super intelligence, right? It could just be good enough intelligence in the hat of really bad people, and it's as good as AGI.
Yeah, and I think there is a belief that humans could actually be made extinct from a non-conscious AI. Like imagine like really good search and destroy. Mm-hmm. So if there are really good search and destroy drones or droids, they don't have to be conscious. Like they're not going to be thinking about, who am I? Do I exist? What's my purpose? They have a purpose. Their purpose is search and destroy, and they've exhausted the life forms on Earth.
Yeah, you don't have the boring, human emotions coming in the way. It's got a mission it's going to execute. Right?
Yeah, I kind of laugh at, not that that's a funny thing to laugh about, but I laugh about 500 years from now, aliens coming to Earth to visit, and they're like, "What is wrong with these life forms? They're so hostile." Like, we're trying to work with them, but it's just our leftover crap of like search and destroy robots that are not going to be, they're not going to be open to discussions or trying to like, or any type of partnerships or treaties. They're all about like just pure kill.
They're just programmed to do one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So the poor aliens in the future that come to visit Earth will be very confused, or maybe they've seen this before. They're like, oh, these were created by some idiots that weren't able to keep it under control. Maybe we can, do some excavating here and try to find out their story.
That's funny. No, so before we'll come back to AGI a little later. Now, tell us about where in the world is AI today, according to you? What is working? What is not working?
So, AI's made a lot of progress during the last 10 years with. There is a theme. This isn't just with AI, but it's also with tech. You can say for people that are older in the industry, they can say, look, things used to be hard. Virtualization, like you got Docker and Kubernetes today, things used to be hard. Everything used to be hard. AI used to be hard. So if you wanted to have AI in your product, you're going to do a lot of programming and take some high risk bets on unproven talent to try and go figure out how to get over the fence into engineering and do something that was useful. But what we've seen in the last 10 years is we've seen improvements with storytelling. But this is storytelling to satisfy a SME, to satisfy a subject matter expert. Because the data scientists would always try to satisfy themselves with statistical validations on like AUCs and F1 scores and accuracies.
Sure.
But there's a gap to the true SME. And I've learned to respect that the true SME may not have a college degree. The true SME is the human that's worked the process the longest. And you need to respect that. So if you're talking to someone who's worked a process for 10 or 20 years, their background doesn't matter. The fact that they worked that process, they are the expert. They are the expert in the room. And I've seen data scientists fail, including myself, where there's a sense of arrogance that, we have a STEM foundation, we can walk into any problem, we can understand it quickly. I've kind of given up on that mindset. So it's quickly evolved with the storytelling. It's not hard to surprise an audience with what AI can do today. So I would say you can surprise people by the capabilities, but AI today, it's still, I'm fairly excited. I think we're going into an applied space where we're looking at companies deploying hundreds and even thousands of models in production, doing real things that matter with consequences. I think we're ready for AI to really transform healthcare, where it's making life and death decisions and you trust it. So trust and storytelling are big parts of where we are today with AI. So I think we're right at the turning point where you're going to see mass adoption.
Interesting. I think, like what is this? I don't know whether it's really the Goldilocks moment in AI, because the combination of things that are unique to humans, storytelling, the creative aspect, and combining that with statistical machine learning, or even like deep learning and some of the other techniques too, is where AI is today, where we have kind of figured out the right combination of bringing it together to deliver value for folks. Would you agree?
Yeah, like one of the powerful themes I didn't hit on is all the data that matters. So all the data that matters to who? The data science team? No, I don't really care about their opinions on the data and features, but all the data that matters to the subject matter expert. And so we're in a position now where it's truly everyone's responsibility in a company to understand how they can scope a data science problem or an AI problem. They don't need to solve it, but they need to understand how they could frame an opportunity to raise awareness to the data science team. And I think that we're now in a position where everyone has that responsibility, whether you're in sales, marketing, HR, finance, every part of the business, people need to be thinking about it that way today. 5 years ago, it was a mess.
You have talked about AI moving from, and you kind of touched upon this, we're moving from just experimentation to now storytelling, to now moving more towards trusted deployments where hundreds and thousands of models are actually running and generating value. Elaborate that transition for me a little bit more. Double click on that.
Yeah, so we're moving away from the term artificial intelligence to augmented intelligence, because it really celebrates the integration between the SME. Because this is what a proper AI lifecycle should look like. You find a problem worth solving. Sometimes we go the other way. Sometimes we have the shiny new toy. We're trying to find a place to go put it. So find a problem worth solving. You have the SME involved. You have AI build a model, and then they're working with the data science team. The SME is not required to understand the model building process, and now they're reviewing what is driving the model. What are the features that are important? And the SME is there to react to that. That might inspire new features or new data points, new feeds, or that might inspire criticism, where they want to. They're like, I don't trust this model. You're saying the number one reason they want to hire people is because their religion, or like you think of some like edge use case where the SME is going to blow it up. But if something gets into production, now that human that was trapped in a process is now allowed to evolve the process. So the idea of one and done is a naive approach. You don't train a model once and deploy it and you're done forever. It needs to be this feedback loop coming back with the SME. The SME's innovating. So augmented intelligence is kind of this new category that we're coming into. But to get to automated intelligence, you need storytelling, but you also need trusted AI. So do you trust AI to make life and death decisions? And that is something that we're talking a lot more about today. And I don't want to be too extreme, but imagine like you have if you had designed an AI system to zap or potentially use a gun to take out some threat, would you trust yourself to walk in front of that computer vision system? And so most people, like especially 5 years ago, I'd say absolutely not. Like there's no, because you're worried what AI will do on the edge cases. Like if AI is seeing something it hasn't seen before, it can react in unexpected ways.
We worry about people like me with a different colored skin walking in front of it, right?
Yeah,
It's a real
yeah,
problem.
yeah. It may not be able to detect that you're a person because it's been trained on a biased data set where it doesn't have that representation. Or we could also imagine deploying. You train the system in this region, and then you go to deploy it somewhere else, and it's really confused. And so you need to have systems that are responsible enough to know that they're out of their trusted training set, and they're unwilling to automate decisions. They're trying to pull a human into the loop. But it's all in the spirit of augmentation, right? The humans need to work with AI closely, and there will be some decisions where the consequences are so high, they may never be automated. Like imagine if AI is telling you that your surgery needs to be delayed, like you're going in for heart surgery and AI is saying that this needs to be delayed. That might be a decision that is always made with a human in the loop. Like your surgeon's reviewing the data, the AI is trying to make a compelling case, and the surgeon is deciding whether or not it's going to act on that recommendation.
Yeah. No, I like this this notion of augmented intelligence. In fact, honestly, I've been personally talking about augmented intelligence for, I don't know, about the last 6 years or so. And the notion that AI should really, we call it artificial intelligence, but there's honestly nothing artificial about it, right? It's just more, yes, you're mimicking human cognitive functions in software, and there's intelligence being, you're expanding the human intelligence spectrum to really make use of powerful technologies like machine learning. That's where AI is today, and I love how you frame it. It's augmented intelligence, and that's the right notion or the right framing of the problem, or how we should be thinking about it, right? The other thing, you said, like the three things I took away is like one is definitely data, right, in terms of knowing all the data that you want, the right data at the right context, understanding how it changes and what it needs to be like to actually solve problems. You talked about teamwork, which is AI is not just a once and done thing. It is a continuous loop, and it requires multiple actors to play in a lot of part. We'll get into that a little bit more, and then you talked about trust, right? Now, all this aside, there's a statistic, and you talked about it too. There's 84% of all AI projects fail. So why is that? When we have the framework, when we understand this, why does it fail?
Yeah, it fails. So the failure reasons are funny. Well, they're not funny. They're sad. They're unfortunate. So so sometimes it can fail because of the buy-in to the company. And so some data scientists that fail in an org will blame the company. Like imagine if you and I are recruiting, if we're going to do an experiment, we actually go find a data scientist that they have everything on paper, they're motivated, they're ambitious, and they go to work, they could still fail in a company, because if I go build a model for predicting like lead quality, and if that model is not consumed, so sometimes data scientists get confused by the politics. They're like, look, I built this model, it's available, here's the API, and people aren't using it, and therefore it's not my fault that things have failed. So I've been involved where I haven't really understood. So I think, to get to the point, it's failing because of jargon breakdown, communication breakdown, a lack of buy-in and support. I don't want to. I could talk where I'm pretty antagonistic against the data scientists, but in the moment I actually want to defend them, because if you're a data scientist and if I throw you into a company, and if someone says, what's the highest priority? Oh, go work on a churn model for customer success. It's over there somewhere. And if you're trying to drive through these SQL databases where you're really confused, you're doing a lot of discovery, and then you find out later that you never actually had access to the appropriate system, or you're lacking insider knowledge or subject matter expertise, that's not a good situation for you to be in. You're just kind of set up to fail. And so I really like the idea of you having a full-time analyst on the other side who is there to be the data expert, who is there to ramp with the SMEs, is there to answer any question, where you would then work with them and you'd say, what are the priorities for the department? What are you trying to do? Oh, this is churn. These are our features. We actually use this other set as well. I'm going to merge that for you. Because the classical thing that happens, so this is the data scientists will go and build a model, and then they'll find out that they have 99% accuracy on the churn model because of target leakage. But the target leakage will be customer color, or it'll be something really weird. You want to have that analyst right there with you to immediately say, aha, this is not how we should do it. Yeah, data science community. Yep. And I don't want to, I screwed up on all of this stuff, like in my career. Like when I first joined HireVue, I think the second month I was there, I sent a plot to the CEO and CTO, and Mark Newman, the founder, responded and said, what the hell am I looking at? And that's an example of I'm not communicating what I need to communicate with the executives. Like I think it was off-putting to me. I'm like, oh, geez, like I'm doing all this work. Why aren't you appreciating it? But I'm the one that's not appreciating what a CEO has to do.
Is there an aspect of, it's actually interesting you say that. And it comes down to this, right? It's like AI is, I look at it, it is going to be a team sport for the foreseeable future. It's going to be, and it cannot be solved by one person, one role at all. Actually, later on, I'm talking to a gentleman who is thinking about this concept of lean ML, right? What does a lean ML looks like? Laszlo. I'll send you a recording after we're done. But it's interesting. There is the role of people, which is like, how do you get the different talent bases, different kinds of expertise in a room to go solve problems together, picking up the right problems and stuff. And then there is the aspect of tooling, right? There is a lot of capabilities that are already out there. Is there some best practices there? And like most data scientists come up with their own set of tools and libraries that they're familiar with, they really want to actually adopt. And then you have the engineering, the DevOps, that kind of functions too, who's looking at it from an enterprise IT standpoint, looks at it differently. Talk to me a little bit about like what are you seeing there in that space about running AI at scale?
Yeah, I think it's important for people that are working on AI to really you have to think about the business more than your own career development, because I do see examples where some data scientists will be antagonistic to a data robot or an H2O or Microsoft Azure, or like some platform coming in. They'll be antagonistic because they'll see it as, oh, well, I wanted to learn this stuff myself. Like I wanted to, if you're my CEO, I'm essentially, I like phrasing it this way because then they realize there's a problem. I'm essentially saying, rather than buying this platform and doing something useful this month, I want you to fund my tuition for the next year to see if I can do the same thing that they would have done the next month. So instead of costing you, $4,000 for whatever that monthly spend was, I now want you to burn $160,000 for something that's high risk and will probably fail because I selfishly think it would be good for my career. So I talked to a data scientist a couple years ago, and they were complaining because they were using Amazon SageMaker, and it was making things easy for them. And they weren't learning the fundamentals. And I was laughing because I was saying, you should focus on getting more things done, more things in production, and offering more value to your employer. And that is what's going to get the most attention. That's what's going to get you promoted. That's the rarefied thing to find in the market, is someone who's actually built something that's been consumed after they've left. And so sure enough, that person ended up getting promoted, and they were able to kind of go up in their career. But in the moment, they're so focused on, they want to know how to build it, and they don't like the idea of a platform taking that tuition away. And I think that's an academic mindset or a technophile mindset. Sure. What's the business mindset?
And so if you really think AI being that powerful technology that can, transform businesses, give you the competitive advantage and stuff, this brings up the age-old question, right? Where do you build this capability in-house to be really differentiated against your competition, have the edge over everybody else? Or is it too late that, the best way to move forward is to just buy? Or does it really depend on what business you're in?
So I think the important question to ask is, what is your true IP? And so the true IP for most companies, it's in their data. So they have this unique data they've captured. That's their competitive moat. And so let's pretend that you and I are equal competitors. We've gone out and we've built our companies for 5 years, and we've acquired unique data sets, and we are fierce competitors. We hate each other, but we've acquired competing data sets where we compete head-to-head. You decide to build it yourself. You're going to go build AI yourself to get leverage that experience. And during the next 12 months, we can be optimistic and say you got one model in production. I decided to partner with a platform play, and I was able to test 20 iterations the first month. And by the end of the year, I'm on my 200th model, and I have 20 things in production that are being consumed with customer feedback. Which company is going to be better off? The one that I think people also, I've been in funny conversations with executives where the moment AI comes up, and this is for companies that don't have AI at all, the moment AI comes up, they'll say, let's get the patent attorneys in the room. And they're missing the point, because when I've written AI patents in the past, but when I get to the model part, what I'll do is I'll say F is some unknowable function, undefined, and X is some undefined input. It could be anything you can imagine, and it will produce some output Y, which is anything that possible. And then I'll write like a whole paragraph about all the things that could be. Because why am I doing that? I need to make sure when the next version of deep learning comes around, or XGBoost, that you don't go around me. And so, like, to think that your model is the thing that matters is laughable, because it's all about learning. Like, going back to intelligence, it's all about your learning cycles. And so if you complete one learning cycle this year, and if I'm running at 100, which company is going to be better off in the market?
And it's the throughput, it's the speed at which you learn. And learning, it's a very, it's a little metaphorical to think about it, but you're using machine learning to actually increase the organizational learning on the problem and solving it, getting it faster to the solution, right? So it's interesting. I got some rapid fire questions for you. What, according to you, is probably the most important piece of work that's happening in AI today?
I think the most important work is going to be redefining deep learning from the ground up. And so this is me geeking out too much, and I know this is a rapid fire question, so I'll answer as quickly as I can. Deep learning, I think, is kind of a parlor trick a bit. It can be useful, it's getting value, but you look at GPT-3, GPT-10 is not going to be conscious. It's not going to suddenly magically help us. And so we have to fundamentally rethink how these systems should be working, and what that ends up helping us with are training on sparse data sets, experience. It's one thing to train on a very sparse data set and get the same insights a human would get versus training on Wikipedia and then mimicking something that gets your attention. This one is much more useful. And so, so the mass adoption is going to help a lot. Smart home, all these things that we are going to be seeing firsthand in the next 10 years, it will really help the way that we interact. But it also blows open the Black Mirror category. Do you want Alexa to be stateful? Do you want Alexa to actually know that your kid went to school today? Because what if Alexa gives your kid some advice that you decide is not useful? Or what if you pour water on your Alexa and it has a stateful personality, and now your kid is depressed because that wasn't backed up, and they feel like a loss of a personality or a loss of life, where you're like, no, like this was just a stateful personality. You quickly enter this reality that is really messy.
I agree. That's an interesting question. Do you want your digital assistants, smart assistants, to be stateful? I would argue that I would kind of argue they're selectively stateful in certain things, for sure. It's about moving that spectrum a little wider, and that's when you open up the Black Mirror Pandora box.
Yeah, that's really funny, because I'm thinking, like, being in AI, you and I might say, yes, I want mine to be stateful, completely stateful. But then in 4 months from now, we're having coffee, and you're like, Ben, why are you so depressed? And you're like, oh, I thought I was backing up my stateful personality, and I wasn't, and now I'm feeling this intense loss. And you start laughing at me and be like, well, you're letting it hijack your empathy, and you've formed an emotional attachment to something that you programmed, and you know it's not real, but you can kind of see this path that...
I agree. It's funny. It's funny. Now, let me move on. Like, give me an example of something you heard 10 years ago and thought it was just really ridiculous, and now it's possible, it's happening, or at least, in the site.
So localized radar, and I don't want to sound too militaristic, but localized radar shows that you could shoot people through walls unseen. So you can have a drone like go park by a home and shoot someone through a wall. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have rolled my eyes and said, like, yeah, I think that's science fiction. And so...
it was, yeah.
Yeah. So this is outside data science. You have warp bubbles. So NASA has some research on warp bubbles. You can go research. They're not practical yet, but they've gone out of... they have a funny term they use for it. It's no longer nonsensical. So, like, the idea of going faster than the speed of light. We grew up where that was laughable, and now it's entered this realm of, like, well, hold on. We need to... So the supercomputer says yes.
Warp bubbles, I love it. Give me a story of how we will be interacting with AI in, say, 100 years.
Well, I think... So I think it's going to change drastically in the next 10 to 20 years, because right now when I program, I'm having to hack away and write all the code. But you can imagine if I have a junior developer, I could task them to go and do these things. So I think in the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to wake up in the morning and interact with your AI system like you might interact with a junior data scientist through verbal commands. So there'll be a lot of video, audio. If you have a project you want to go do, you might propose it to your home. And then if your home has a problem, it's going to engage with you and say, I don't know how to do this, and you'd write that little piece of code. So there's also interfaces like, EEG, brain interfaces, things like that. You have Neuralink.
Yep.
But I think...
That's happening today, for sure. It's actually interesting. You're saying intelligent autonomous systems that almost like we'll just become so... AI will be so around us that we'll no longer be talking about AI, right? I mean, it just will be so invisible. One more, if... someone is listening to this and they're hearing about AI the first time here, what would you advise them to if they want to start in AI, if they want to do something and learn more about AI? Where do they start?
So I think now, unfortunately, they don't have to understand the foundation of AI. Because my opinion has changed from you need to know math, you don't need to know math. So they just need to understand what are examples of use cases in my industry where I could apply it, where I could use it. Everyone, no matter who you are, should be able to scope an AI problem and then take that problem to a data science team and decide if they're capable of solving that. So think of it as a tool like a computer or a database or a car, understanding what the tool is, how you could use it. I think that's what people should start with. And then if they have a passion around it, then they can dig deeper.
That is awesome. No, I like to say that too, right? When mid-career professionals who are like, look, I've been in retail all my life and I hear about this thing about AI, what do I do? I'm like, look, you probably are going to add a lot more value to AI in retail than the AI data scientist coming into retail, right? So use your center of expertise or core competence and then start learning about it. Use it as a tool. I love the way you do it. How can our viewers and listeners connect with you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn, so Ben Taylor Data. I'm on Twitter too, but I joke, if you send me a message on Twitter, I might see it in a month. Unfortunately, I'm to the point now on LinkedIn, I'm getting too many messages, and so if I don't answer a message, just try to be persistent.
Or you can just write your own bot that'll just filter through the noise and give you the signal, right?
That's what I need.
They don't open up the API yet. I tried.
I actually did do some LinkedIn scraping. I have to think about what I can say publicly without getting in big trouble. Because I do value my LinkedIn account, but I was doing some LinkedIn scraping, just trying to like add connections automatically, stuff like that, and I wasn't using their API because their API was kind of limiting. So it was easier to just do the whole web session, log in. And...
Anyway, Ben, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for spending the time today, and I'm sure we'll be chatting more soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right.